I think that's the first time I heard Dylan sing. I think so, yeah. I think what that means, Dylan, is they want to hear you sing more. So, yeah. I don't know, was it... Wow. Yeah, you're right. This is the final message in this series on peace, and my way of looking at peace is that not everything is okay, but in some sense that's okay. It doesn't mean it's totally okay. I mean, we're not okay with abortion, right? We're not okay with that. We're not saying, well, I mean, there's a place, I'm not at peace with that. We're not giving it any kind of approval. It just isn't. But can we still enter into God's peace even when we think about those things? I mean, there's so much stuff around where people are mean to each other. I don't know if you've noticed it. Most of us have seen it at least sometimes, or we read about it, we hear about it, and we're not okay with people being mean to each other, and people yelling at each other, and people talking badly. We're not okay, but in some sense, can we still be at some peace and knowing that God's going to take care of things? There's only so much, if anything, we can really change in this world. The big thing that we should be looking at to change is ourselves, and we all need that. But outside of that, how much can we really, and not that we give up on that, but in the midst of so much needing change, can we be okay today? I mean, can we be at peace today? And although, and I'd be the first to admit, I need to change and you need to change, can you be okay with you? Because we would all say, I know in my life this should change, this should be different, and we can all say that, and it's all true. But even with that, right now, you said, can you be okay with where you're at in life and where God has brought you? And hopefully the answer would be yeah. Well, sure, there's things that need a progress in, but right now, maybe I'm exactly where I need to be. Not just physically in this location, but spiritually, I'm right where I need to be for now. Maybe not for tomorrow, but for now. And for a lot of people, they never had that thought, that right now, where I'm at and who I am is fine, it's okay. I'm content with that. Here, not that I'm going to stop, put my feet up, and no longer make progress, but for right now. And I think when we're okay with ourselves, we're more likely to be okay with others. And when we're okay with others, we treat them different. We think different. We talk to them and we talk about them different and in a good way. So we're here again, the final message in the series on peace, and I do hope that over these past number of weeks, if you've been coming, that you do have a greater sense of internal peace. And that's the goal, not to know about peace, but to experience peace, because God is peace, God gives peace, we're to receive peace and be at peace. And also treat others in a peaceful fashion. That's what it's about. And if we can do that, we've done a lot. Now, there is one word that no one likes to hear. What word don't you like to hear? What's that? No. Right. It's no. I mean, there could be some other ones. But one word that who wants to hear no? That we ask someone or we say something and they say out, no. And maybe they're not mean about it, but who wants to sort of say, well, I wanted to, but you brought the door down, and so I can't do that. I can't, and the answer would be that's correct. You cannot. The answer is no. And sometimes, not always, some people know how to receive no, See, when you ask, if it's a legitimate question, no is okay. If it's not a legitimate question, it's really a demand formed in a question, then no is not okay. But if you're really asking and someone says no, you can be okay with that. And some people, they can be okay. Others, I'm not okay with that. So when you're not, often there's this thing called conflict. You know about that. And sometimes when there's conflict, it's because we have not learned how to submit. Sometimes we talk to kids, don't you know no? Or what is it about no that you don't know? And we have to teach young folks what no means and to receive no without going into some sort of a tantrum. But it's not just little people or young people. It can be older people too. Sometimes they don't know what no is. They think no means fight harder. They think no means we'll get mad and you'll get your way. Or they think no means all kinds of things, and they haven't learned what no means. And it's important to learn what no means. The second word maybe we don't like to hear is submit or submission. Submit, that's a terrible word. It's good for everybody else, but not for me. I would like everyone to submit, because if everyone else does, then I don't have to. And we don't like no, we don't like submission. For some, submit, battle on. And you don't want to fight me because I can get pretty mean. You know, they think like that. So don't tell me no, and don't even suggest that I submit. And here's my first thought for this morning. We can disagree and still have peace. Didn't know if you knew that or not. You can disagree with someone or a group of people and still be at peace with them. And we need to understand that. Especially if you're in a relationship, if you're married, you got a boyfriend, girlfriend, and you know this, that you can not agree on things and we can still be okay. We can still have this sense of peace. If you've been married, like more than 2 days, you know that stuff comes up. And you and your spouse don't always see eye to eye. You don't always agree. And it should be, that's okay. We can still have peace, but for some people, they don't know how to be at peace when there's disagreement. That's a terrible thing. Because as years go on, you're going to disagree about more things. And there's at least 2 big things that married people seem to disagree upon, and where there's a lot of conflict, if you're not careful. One is child rearing. And a lot of you parents, you know that. So little Johnny, little Susie, and you're trying to raise them, you're trying to do the best job, and you have different views on how to raise the kids. And one will think, well, yes, the other will say no in concerns of what they may or may not do, and then, why are you so mean? Well, why are you spoiling her for? And it goes back and forth. Well, when I was a kid, but I was, and pretty soon you're going at it, and little Susie, little Johnny's, and they're just laughing because they got you all worked up. So child rearing is an area. The second big area that causes conflict in marriages and relationships is money. And you've probably found this out. Hey, we have some money. What do you want to do with it? There's only a number of things. You're not going to probably burn it. One, you're going to spend it. And then there's a disagreement on what do we spend it on. Now, if you're a guy, often we want to spend it on different things than what the ladies do, right? And we know that. Guys, we like to spend our money on things that make a lot of noise, that go boom. We like to spend our money on things that go fast. And so that's just us. And if it can create smoke, better yet. That's us. Ladies, you're not thinking that. Make a lot of noise. You're not thinking things that go fast. I mean, a lot of you aren't. There's a few of you that I know that are different like that. But for most part, and so you can spend it or you can put it away. You can save it. Or maybe you're sort of philanthropic and you want to give it to a good cause or someone who is in need or things like that. But there's only a few things, and often in that is this conflict, what we do. I'm guessing that for every husband here, that you never, ever, when your wife came home and she was out shopping and she has a couple bags, I am guessing when you asked the question, how much that cost, and she said, let's say, whatever amount, you didn't say, is that all? Well, you need to go back out there and get some more. You never said that, have you? Is that it? Well, honey, come on now. You deserve better. Get out there. Live it up. It's only money. You've never told her that. What's that? Stop messing with my sermon, okay? I had a point there. I'm sensing a lack of submission from the congregation member right here. So, Bob, get her right. Okay, don't you talk back either, okay? I don't want to get this. Oh, well. In every church there's a few. But we can still disagree and still have peace. I don't have to have my way. Just tell yourself that I don't have to have my way, and I can still be okay. There's a freedom with that. I don't have to have it my way, and I can still be fine. So this whole word submit, it really means to put oneself under. If you tear the word apart, it means to put myself under. Really, it means to obey, to be subject to, or under obedience. And to me, a simple word to look at submit is, when you're driving and there's this upside down red triangle sign, and you know what that means? What? Yield, yeah, yield. It means yield. And what yield means, is you don't have the right of way. Someone else has the right of way. And so if they're coming and you're coming, guess what? You're the one that has to slow down, get out of the way, stop, because they have the right of way. And if you don't yield and they have the right of way, something bad might happen. No one wants to yield, but if you don't, there's going to be a crash. There's no peace in crash. And so to submit really means to yield. And everyone here has to yield to God. God has the right of way. We don't. God always has the right of way. We never have the right of way when it comes to God. To submit, God, basically, you yield to my will and my way. And that's what it means. And because sometimes God says no. He says yes a lot, but sometimes he says no. We find no in his word a lot. He says, do this and don't do that. He says, don't be angry. He says that. He says, don't you gossip. And sometimes we might do that. And don't be talking poorly about other people. That's gossip. And don't steal. And be generous and love one. He says a lot of things. And sometimes it says it's no. And so this is the one verse here, James 4. The end of one verse, the beginning of another verse. But it says, God is opposed to the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Submit, therefore, yield, therefore, to God. And those who are proud don't submit to God. It's only the humble that submit to God. Well, why don't the proud submit to God? Well, part of it, they just don't want to. They don't want to give God the right of way. They want to do it their way. Maybe they think they know better. Maybe they think that God is old-fashioned. That could be. Or they just may not care. Or they might think that I can't be happy if I yield to God because God basically puts a kibosh on my happiness and on my joy, on my fun. And I don't know if I can have fun if I submit to God, and I want to have fun. And so they have a very distorted view of who God is. Or they may think there are no adverse consequences to not submitting to God. So I'll do whatever I want, and God will just be full of grace and mercy and forgiveness however I live. But here it says, you know what? God is opposed to the proud. God is an opponent. God is working against those who are proud. So you don't want to be one of those in that camp. You don't want to be one of those who aren't humble. Because His grace, now there's God's general grace, so there's a grace that everyone receives. I mean, God could have taken your life yesterday, last night, but even the proud, God has given a lot of them, okay, we'll let you go another day, we'll let you go another night. So we're on the receiving end of God's grace. Everyone is. I mean, today, it's a beautiful day out there, the weather, the temperature, the humidity, but that goes to everyone. It's not great for us because we're humble, but for that person, it's cold and miserable out. Huh? No, to that person, humidity is 50% for us. For them, 85%. It doesn't work like that. So God has this general grace He gives to everyone. But we want to be on God's, if you want to call it special grace, according to our behavior and our attitude. And so you don't want God working against you. Who in their right mind wants God working in opposition to them? Let me tell you, that's why some people have a really tough life. It's not everyone. But you look at some folks, their life's just tough. It's always been that way. You look at them, you hear the stories, and you think to yourself, how could it have got so bad? I mean, if you'd have put out a plan, you couldn't have gotten into those bad of circumstances. But it's where they're at. It's where they live. It's like it's always been that way with them. And I'm going to go, for some people, sometimes it's because God is working in opposition to them. They could even be in Christ, but they're still proud. And go, that's not where we want to be. Life is hard enough, isn't it? We go, oh yeah. Why make it harder? You will make your life so much harder if you are proud, that is, you don't submit to God's will. And God will oppose you. He will make things tougher to hopefully you'll come around and you'll submit to Him. That's why He says, look, how do you want to live? Do you want to live with God working against you or for you? If you want Him working for you, submit therefore to God. And that's where we want to be. God says to us, that's where He would love us to be. Submit, therefore, to God about all things. That's where His grace, His undeserved favor is found. That's what we need. I mean, I want to be on the receiving end of God's grace, not His opposition. So we submit to God. I think we'd all go, yeah, we should do that. Whether we do or not, we can agree, yep, that's where we ought to be. Submit to God all the time about everything, no exceptions. That's the goal. But there's something else going on as well. Yield to God, but also yield to earthly authority. And I'm not saying that's where it gets tougher, but it could be. Yield to not just God, but to other human beings. Honor those who have authority. And guess what? Someone, somewhere, has authority over you. There's no exceptions to that. Here we're talking about, actually, the government. It says, let every person be in subjection to the governing authorities. There is no authority except from God, and those which exist are established by God. God is the one who has established governments. Therefore, he who resists authority has opposed the ordinance of God, and they who have opposed will receive condemnation upon themselves. Generally speaking, when you oppose government, you oppose God, because God is the one that put government in place. I know that's not popular. We like to protest. We like to be against government. We like to pick things apart. And can I just say this? There's a rightful time and place for that. There is, but just be careful with that. I mean, they're always downing government. They're always downing people in power. It's easy to do, right? You look at it and you can just say, well, that's not right and that's not right. And look who's suffering on this account. And look over here. And here again, we can all do that, and there's a time. But understand that by and large, God has put government in place to do His work and do His will to some degree. And we're to be subject to the governing authorities. Submissive to Him, but also submissive to those whom God has put into place. Now, of course, the issue is this. We know that God is perfect always. We know that the government, like never, is perfect. So how can I submit to the imperfect? Well, we'll get to that a bit later on that, but to hold that thought, yield to God, yield to government. We're called to do that, but we're not done there. It's also to yield to one another. I'm not in the government, and most of you, you're not in government. But still, to yield to one another comes out of Ephesians. Well, here we go. As we learn to yield, peace will increase. Okay. Let me just talk it through then. Keep that thought up there. Yield to one another. Here's the verse, Ephesians 5:21, and be subject to one another in the fear of Christ. Okay, it's Ephesians 5:21. Be subject to one another in the fear of Christ. Yield to one another. Give other people the right of way, even when they're not right. That's what it means to yield or submit, be subject to one another. So, you're coming on an intersection, and you have the right of way. This other car's coming up, and they don't. They're supposed to yield to you, but they don't see you, or they're not paying attention, or maybe they have some medical condition, and here they come, and you're going to crash. And you can do one of two things. You can say, well, I've got the right of way, so we're just going to crash because I'm right and they're wrong. Or you could do this. Oh man, this is not looking good. I better yield to them, although they're supposed to yield to me. Now, what are you going to do? You're going to, hey, crash is going to happen? I'd hope not. I'd hope you'd say, well, yeah, it's going to be a mess. Someone could get hurt, and if not, my car's going to be damaged, or I'm going to have to go to the shop, and I don't want to do that. So it's better if I slow down. It's better if I stop. It's better if I pull over to avoid crash. And I go, that's what we ought to do, to yield to one another. It's not about who's right or who's wrong. It's not worth crash. So learn to yield even when you're right or you think you are. And like I said a few weeks ago, no one is as right as much as they think. We're wrong more than we know. So with people, even with people, yield instead of crash. And not just yield in action, but yield in attitude. See, in the car, you can swerve, you can slow down, you can yield and still give them hand gestures. Could. But what if you yielded both in car and in heart? That makes a big difference. I go, it's not worth the relational crash. And in so doing, we submit to often the mistakes of others. Is it right? No, it's not right, but it's all right. Because we make plenty of mistakes ourselves. We have bad days. We have attitude issues. We have sleepless nights. We have other things going on. We have a past. Everyone is the walking wounded in some way. We all have been hurt. We haven't gotten over all of our hurts. No one has. Some of that we carry with us. And so not everyone is always easy to get along with, are they? So, man, you got that right. Not everyone is always easy to get along with. On that we agree, don't we? And for some of you, you're thinking, I don't think there's anyone easy to get along with. I mean, not if you really get to know them. So maybe I don't really want to get to know anyone. You've discovered that relationship is tough and requires a lot. You thought if you found the right person, like the perfect person, that life would now be great and wonderful and easy. And maybe some of that's happened. But for most, you found that along with that, there's a lot of yielding and submission I have had to do to make this thing work. It's not as easy as I initially thought. Because what happens, in a relationship, that I have issue and this person have issues, and when you get married, guess what happens? The issues don't fall away. The issues collect. They come together. The issues are now multiplied. And sometimes, if you're not careful, the person you thought you could not live without now is the person you don't know you can live with. Sometimes it gets that bad. And now what? Now here's the fourth one. I'm just going to see. I just focus on that or close your eyes. I don't know. Here's the fourth yield. Is yield to God, yield to government, yield to others. And the fourth one is yield to your husband. We're talking about women here, okay? These days, you kind of have to specify what that means. But yield to your husband, and so you can't see the, whoa. All right. Well, when you get there, Ephesians 5:22. Here's Ephesians 5:22. You can see part of it at the bottom. Wives, be subject, that is, be in submission to your own husbands as to the Lord. This is a wife's favorite verse in all of Scripture. A lot of them memorize that. They have plaques around the house. And I don't want to forget this one. Man, I don't want to forget this one. And by the way, guys, if I can just clue you in, don't be quoting this to your husband or to your wives all the time. Don't get her a shirt for her birthday that says, it's just not going to go well. I can just tell you that. And it's easy to make jokes about this thing, but you have to biblically do something with this verse, with these verses, with this thought. And this is why wives may ask, and this is Ephesians 5:23, the next verse, it says, this is why wives be subject to your husband as the Lord, because the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ also is head of the church. And so the husband-wife relationship is compared to the relationship between Jesus Christ and the church, which is the bride, basically the church is the bride of Christ. So we know that the church shouldn't be leading Christ. We know the church shouldn't be telling God what to do or Jesus what to do. And what God's saying, we'll back it up. And so the same is true with husbands and wives. And I'm not here to try to pick on the wives now. It does say, in this same chapter that the men or the husbands are to love their wives as Christ loved the church and gave. It does say that, absolutely. But we're never told as husbands that we are to submit to our wives. The Bible never says that. We are to love them and love them well, absolutely. But this word, be subject to, submit, place ourselves under, is directed toward the wives in relation to husbands. And in verse 22, when it says, as to the Lord, what it means is, as you submit to your husbands, you are also submitting to the Lord. It's not one or the other, it's both at the same time. And if you don't, it's both at the same time. And I'm not here for this rallying cry, but we have to understand that submission is important, whether it's to God. And so we all need to submit everyone to God. We all need to submit everyone to government. We all need to submit everyone to one another, but in this relationship also wives to husbands. And so if we're doing all of that, this is not so difficult. Now, some of you wives, you've learned what this means. You've unpacked that. You haven't brushed it aside. You've taken this serious, and over the years, you've discovered what it means to submit to your wives and to submit to your husband. And you're thinking, you know what? That's the way to live. That's the way to go. This is incredible. You see, it's more difficult to lead than it is to follow. Much more difficult. I'll tell you what else. In the marital relationship, who's going to be held more responsible for the relationship? I'm going to tell you who. It's the men. It's the husbands. Why? Because we're the leaders of that. We are much more responsible for the marriage than what the ladies or the women are. So some of you guys, take it on. I'm just saying, hey guys, be men. Step it up. That's what God's called you to do. Don't be passive here in any area. You say, well, I don't have the leadership gift. Well, maybe not, but still lead. Others, but my wife's a better leader than me. And that's true in some cases. It doesn't mean that women don't have a leadership gift. A lot of them do. Hey, a lot of them can lead better than me. I understand that. But guys, in this relationship in a marriage, you are to lead. So don't put the responsibility on your wife. That's not fair. You lead. And can I tell you this? Make it as easy as possible for her to submit. I don't know if it'll ever be easy, but make it as easy as possible for her to submit to your leadership. So you learn what it means to walk with God. And hopefully, she may or may not, but chances are she'll be more inclined to follow as you submit to God. It's hard to submit to someone who's not living in submission to someone else. But as you submit to God, here again, it just increases the chances that she may submit to you because she sees a person living in submission. But even if you don't, submission should be going on anyway. And one of the quickest things people want to know is, well, when don't I have to? Women, well, yeah, but. Immediately we want to know where the exception's at. Where is the out? Because there is one. I just say, ladies, and I use this, if your husband tells you to go rob a bank, you can say, I ain't doing that. Right? Whenever the demand is to do something that you know is not right, that's not godly, that's not moral, that's not biblical, that's not ethical, you don't have to do that. You should know that. But what if it's not him telling you to do something? What if he's acting on you in a manner that's not biblical, that's not loving, that's not ethical? Then what? How much do I have to, whenever? I was at my men's group yesterday, and we're talking about this. And one guy says this, yeah, it was either my parents or my grandparents. Whenever my dad ran out of iced tea, and he had like ice still in there, he would rattle his glass. And his wife knew that meant to come over and get his glass and fill it up with iced tea and bring it back to him. I go, that's a wonderful biblical. And I'm saying, is that right or wrong? Hey, you know what? Maybe this was 20 years ago or 40 years. I mean, maybe generational. Or maybe it was just kind of their fun kind of way to, I don't know. I didn't know him. It doesn't sound right? It sounds, if I did that, and one of our guys said, if I did it to my wife, she would go and fill it up. Well, when she brought it back, she'd pour it over my head. Right? We go, yeah. Some of you wives are going, yeah, that's exactly right. In fact, I'd bring 2 back. And so I'm not saying, well, that's wrong. I'm just saying, well, it could be. It sounds bizarre to me. Because I know that wouldn't work where I know that. But where don't I have to? And instead of going into all these things, can I just say this? Wherever his behavior on you is damaging, and that's pretty wide open. Wherever it's damaging, and you have to decide what damage is. And damage can be different for different folks. But wherever it's damaging, I'm going to say, there's your exception there. You don't submit to behavior that damages you. I don't think God's calling us to that. And can I say this? Wives, you always protect those who can't protect themselves. I think I'm pretty safe with that thought. Meaning with kids, if your husband is acting in a manner that is damaging, they can't protect themselves. You got to come in and run interference. Or you need to make the phone call where if you can't, someone else can. You need to do that. And I think you know that. And so I don't want you coming away with Scripture and saying, man, I gotta, and I want to say, no, there is exceptions. And it's okay to live in that. So don't, if you have a husband that knows this much about Bible, and that's about the only verse he knows, you don't have to bow down to that stuff. That's a lot of nonsense. And it's not that I'm a tough guy, but if you need to call, you can always think you can call me. And if I can't do it, I'll find someone that can have a conversation and maybe help someone get an understanding. That doesn't mean you can rattle your glass. That doesn't mean you can name call. That doesn't mean you can get loud. That doesn't mean you can intimidate. It doesn't mean that. But generally speaking, let me put it in this way: submit as much as you can, and that'll be different. But submit as much as you can. And when we're living in general submission to God, in general submission to government, in general submission to one another, I think we'll understand what this means as much as I can. Just have that attitude. I'm going to submit as much as I possibly can to my husband, because God has put him in leadership, in headship, in our relationship. And as I do it, I also submit to God as much as I can, but not to anything that's damaging to me in my spirit. I don't believe for a moment that's what that verse is referring to. So with that, right now we're going to go into communion. I know I went past already. I don't even know what to do with that. I think Dylan sang too long. And so he put me in a bind. You guys come forward. It's going to be doing communion.